All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend Emily Atkin. Emily is a climate reporter for Think Progress, which you can find at thinkprogress.org. You can also follow her on Twitter at @morwe. Emily, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Emily, last month there was actually a huge refinery explosion in Torrance, California. Let's begin. If people haven't heard, tell us what actually happened there.
Yeah, so I think that the news cycle recently has been kind of dominated by oil trains kind of, derailing and exploding and stuff like that. But we've actually been
There's
having
so
some
many
other...
things that are exploding around. We all we're talking about is trains exploding, which we're actually going to talk about in a little bit. But let's talk about other explosions.
I know, right? Well, it does happen. I think explosions just, they happen so much more when you're using so much more fuel because, it's the winter. But anyway, so while all these derailments were happening, a big explosion happened at a oil refinery in Torrance, California. We're not really exactly sure why it happened. I know that at the time the refinery wasn't even in full production. They were doing some maintenance, and a big old explosion happened in this very complicated piece of equipment that I can tell you about later. But what wound up happening was just a big explosion. People felt like they were experiencing an earthquake, and then some white ash basically rained down in the surrounding city. The refinery is right in the middle of a very populated city.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at so let's start out talking. We'll circle back to the equipment in a second. But so when you look at this ash, it's really, really scary. It looks like the photos are kind of post-apocalyptic, where it looks like a volcano exploded. It's really, really scary stuff.
Well, those are the photos right around the actual scene of the explosion, in the refinery. They actually look like black and white photos, but they are color photos. Just because it's almost like snow or like a desert or something. It's really intense looking. When the dust blew over to the actual city, it was more like snow, kind of like light snow falling on the cars. So you would see spotted dust all over the car, and it's whitish gray, kind of. People around described it as a volcanic looking ash.
Crazy. And so the company and the city are saying that this ash is completely fine. You can, you might get a little skin irritation, a little eye irritation, but we actually aren't 100% sure what's exactly in this ash and how dangerous it actually is, right? There's actually some very legitimate questions on whether or not this stuff that people are breathing is actually safe.
Right. Well, that's where we get into the kind of weird, complicated part about the piece of equipment that exploded. It's a thing in a refinery called a fluid catalyst cracker. And basically, I'm not going to go into the huge, complicated thing about what it does and how it does it, but each one uses a different kind of catalyst, basically, that is made up of different metal oxides and different chemicals, and most every refinery uses a different kind of catalyst, which basically just makes turns the crude oil into gasoline, basically, is the simplest way to put it. And we're not actually sure what this catalyst is. I've tried to talk to chemists and experts that work with refineries, and they're saying well, you can't know exactly what the health effects are unless you know what the catalyst is. And I've asked Exxon multiple times to tell me what the catalyst is, and they're not telling me. They're not telling anybody right now. So that's where we're at.
Well, so what are there regulations on certain type? I mean, doesn't that seem like there's something that should be readily available, that's something that environmental regulators, that the town should know what type of chemicals? I mean, this goes to, again, I know the answer is probably no, but this seems like something that people should know when something like this happens, because that's actually pretty important to know what chemicals are being released into the air.
I think probably what we could do is that, we could probably freedom of information request it. But the issue is that a lot of times these things that companies use are protected by trade secrets.
Wow.
So, it's kind of the same issue with fracking fluid, when, you want to know, well, what's in the fracking fluid that you're injecting underground, or or that, and and companies don't always have to tell you because it's protected by their intellectual property rights. So I think that might be the case here. I'm not totally sure, but I do know that we are in the process of trying to figure out exactly what it is. We've been, myself and my colleague Sasha, who actually works in California for us. Yeah. He's been talking to some representatives of the union that represents the workers at the Torrance Refinery, and they think that they know what the catalyst is. So we're looking at it right now. We have some. We do know that there were some elements in it. Like we know that there's nickel in it, there's vanadium in it. But now we're trying to look at whether if there was arsenic in it, and if those amounts were enough to harm human health and stuff like that. We're trying to figure it out.
Well, and again, what's even crazy about this is supposedly, I mean, so you were saying this thing wasn't even in like full production when this accident happened. They were just like cleaning this thing and it exploded. I mean, what did they like spill a cup of coffee on it or something? And it just like, and it just this blew up. I mean, obviously we don't know the answer to that, but like, to me, that seems like crazy that, I mean, one, it's crazy that this stuff is so dangerous to explode anyway, but like the fact that it wasn't even like running at full steam and it just went up is scary.
I think we'll probably find out within a couple of weeks. I know that the California state legislature has launched an investigation into it, and I know that but that's the issue with things like this, is that it's going to take us a while to figure out what happened and why it happened, and by that time no one's really going to care anymore.
Yeah, no, and it's ridiculous that we well, it's also, I guess we kind of get distracted by other things exploding all the time. It's sort of hard to keep track of what the current explosions are and what the investigations in there are. In the article, and again, I'm talking to my friend Emily Atkin from Think Progress, thinkprogress.org, on Twitter at @morwe. One of the things you write about, and I think this is actually pretty important to discuss, is that just because we don't know if the ash and what this town is breathing and been coated in is actually safe or not, there's a certain amount of psychological distress that goes along with that, because if again, it's like, this is where you live. I mean, can you go outside? Can you breathe without thinking, oh my God, do I have to move away? Do I have to get my kids out of here? Talk a little bit about that, because that's something that's really, really legitimate and is kind of gets ignored in situations like this.
I know, and you know what? It was a interesting conversation I had with my editor about this when I wrote about it, because there's research that, like you said, says that if you're given psychological impacts. There's a lot of psychological impacts to pollution events, and one of them, which has been shown multiple times, is that if you're unsure, if there's ambiguity surrounding the situation, like if you're unsure if the death is harmful or not, if you're filled with that kind of worry, it contributes to other types of health effects. So just any kind of stressor, and obviously stresses lead to sickness. And that's been shown multiple times. And I had this conversation with my editor before we published, along the lines of like, well, should we even publish this? Because we're telling people that, they say it's safe, but there's actually, we actually don't know if it's safe, and we're contributing to their ambiguity. So we actually could be, contributing to their having health problems. So, but it doesn't make it any less true.